Wendy couldn't help but stare at Cameron Pell. She had heard about the oddly beautiful Pell twins before, but seeing one of them in person was an entirely different experience. Although he was not stereotypically handsome, there was something captivating about him, like a siren or a vampire. It seemed he had some kind of supernatural hold over anyone who gazed on him. Millie, flustered by Cameron's appearance, steadied herself. Thank you." Millie attempted to sign along with her spoken words, blushing slightly at her broken ASL. The boy looked at Millie, a small smirk appearing in the corner of his mouth. It was nothing. He signed back. He turned his attention to Wendy then, and she cowered under his intense gaze. "Ask him if he heard what those women were talking about," Wendy whispered loudly to Millie. Before Millie had time to even open her mouth, Cameron began quickly signing to her. "I believe I caught some of what they had to say. I'm not deaf, after all." He glared at Wendy, and Millie couldn't help but let out a small chuckle. "He says he heard." Millie looked up at Cameron then, confused. She had always thought that Cameron and his twin sister Camilla were out to get Olivia. Why would he choose to help Millie and Wendy this time? It seems it would have been much more prudent for him to have joined forces with Carolina Crawford and started by letting the woman take out Millie and Wendy. "What are you doing roaming the halls in this hour anyways?" Millie attempted to sign as she spoke. "Yeah, why were you here in the first place?" Wendy chimed in, hiding behind Millie slightly after Cameron shot her with another look. "I suppose the same thing you two were doing." Cameron signed to Millie, cocking an eyebrow at her. Just then, a door slammed somewhere in the grand house, and Millie and Wendy jumped. Cameron, of course, remained completely still, not one to be easily startled. "You two should be heading back to your room," Cameron signed. "This is not a safe place for girls like you to be wandering at night." Millie was about to retort his comment when Cameron swiftly turned on his heel and glided away from them. Wendy raised her eyebrows at Millie. "Creepy dude, huh?" Millie nodded. She knew Cameron was an odd duck, but she had to admit there was something about him that was starting to pique her interest. Millie and Wendy carefully snuck into Wendy's room, closing the door quietly behind them so as not to draw any attention. As soon as the door shut, they both sighed with relief, collapsing to the floor. My heart was racing so fast. Wendy clutched her hand over her heart as she tried to return her breathing to normal. "I can't believe how lucky we got that Cameron showed up when he did." "I know." Millie shook her head, still in disbelief. "I hate to think what those women would have done if they would have found us." Millie and Wendy looked at each other and gulped. They both knew how close they had come to losing their lives tonight. Carolina and Madeline did not seem like the types to go easy on anyone. And besides, they had heard Madeline tell Carolina she could use strangers as practice for murder. "Should we go tell Olivia?" Wendy asked. "She deserves to know, doesn't she?" Millie shook her head. "I don't want her to freak out before we have a plan in place." "We have to tell someone," Wendy insisted. "What about Chris Jones? He'll certainly want to look out for Olivia." Millie knew Wendy was right, but she wasn't sure he was the best person to tell right away. "Chris can be a bit impulsive. We don't want to do anything that causes a scene. And we especially don't want to ruin Olivia's chances of winning the Knife God competition." "I'm not going to be able to sleep until we tell someone about this," Wendy pressed, pulling her knees to her chin in fear as she thought back to what they had heard. "Okay, let's go tell Jeremy," Millie decided. "His family is well connected, and Lord knows he's dealt with attempted murder before." The girls stood resolutely, then made their way back to the door. They each took a deep breath before quietly opening the door and peering into the hallway. Seeing the coast was clear, the girls snuck out, careful to step lightly so as not to draw any attention. They crept down the hallway, flinching at every subtle creak and crack of the old manor as they went. Suddenly, as if in a horror film, A woman appeared from around the corner. Wendy jumped when she saw who it was. Standing there at the end of the hall, about to walk in their direction, was Carolina Crawford. Seemingly startled herself, Carolina quickly readjusted her stance, pulling her robe tighter around her body. Millie grabbed her friend's arm and dug her nails in, willing her to hold it together. She smiled at Carolina. "Good evening." She pulled Wendy along, hoping to pass by Carolina with nothing more than a quick greeting. But Carolina stopped them. "Hold up, do I know you?" Carolina studied the faces of the girls, but clearly couldn't place them. They both shook their heads. "No." Carolina put a hand on her hip and raised an eyebrow. "Why were you so freaked when you saw me if we don't even know each other?" She directed her question at Wendy. Wendy opened her mouth, but the words wouldn't come out. Luckily, Millie had enough adrenaline that she felt as though her brain were moving at double speed. "Well, you don't know who we are, but we of course know who you are, Carolina." At this, Carolina raised both eyebrows, but Millie pressed on. "After all, the eldest daughter of the Crawford family? And with all your paparazzi photos always showing up on page 6? My friend was just shocked by how much you look like your pictures." Carolina smirked, satisfied enough by this answer. "I get that a lot." Millie and Wendy smiled at her, then attempted to make their way past her yet again, but she once more spoke up. "Wait, where are you guys going in the middle of the night?" This time, Wendy was able to form the words. "To get snacks," she blurted out. "We didn't get any dessert earlier, and we wanted to see if there was any left." Carolina looked the girls up and down, a disgusted expression on her face. "You know your body needs at least 14 hours of fasting in order to properly digest?" Millie nodded. "That's a really good tip. Did you know that, Wendy?" Wendy shook her head no. "Anyways, we've already made this plan for tonight, but tomorrow we'll definitely start a new fasting diet, won't we?" Wendy nodded vigorously. The girls stood there smiling awkwardly at Carolina for another moment. Then Millie finally spoke up. "Okay, bye." She and Wendy turned and scurried off down the hall towards Jeremy's room, leaving Carolina standing there. "Freaks," Carolina huffed to herself before continuing on her way. She let her robe fall loose then, revealing a knife nestled into the waistband of her pajamas. Millie and Wendy rushed down the hall of the floor Jeremy was staying on. Once they located the correct door, they began knocking quietly, looking over their shoulders as they did. "Do you think he's even awake?" Wendy asked. But before they even had time to wonder, the door opened a crack and Jeremy peered out at them. "Millie? Wendy?" Jeremy asked, propping the door open further, revealing that he was in nothing but boxers. The girls glanced at each other briefly, but immediately got down to the business at hand. "We need to talk to you. Can we come in?" Millie asked, once again checking over her shoulder. Sure." Jeremy stepped aside, allowing the girls to enter his room. Following the girls' paranoia, Jeremy looked up and down the hall, checking for anyone who may be lurking around, before he closed the door behind them. As soon as Jeremy turned to the girls, they both broke out in tears. "What's wrong? Is someone following you?" Jeremy rushed towards the girls, their behavior at the door suddenly making sense. Millie shook her head no, but neither she nor Wendy seemed able to form the words. "Let me get you some water." Jeremy rushed over to a mini fridge in the corner of his room and pulled out 2 glass bottles of mineral water, handing one to each girl. Jeremy waited patiently as Millie chugged her bottle of water, while Wendy sipped on it carefully in between heaving sobs. It had just hit them all at once how much danger they could have been in tonight. They were only 17. They weren't prepared to go up against real-life murderers. "It's okay, you guys are safe now." Jeremy spoke in a calm tone, kneeling down to get at Millie and Wendy's level. Millie finished her water and took a couple of deep breaths, then looked up at Jeremy. "Thank you. Sorry to bother you so late." It's okay," Jeremy insisted. He didn't want them to feel they had to apologize when they'd clearly been through something traumatic. Just then, they heard a noise coming from the bathroom. The sound of a faucet being turned off and someone sliding open a shower door. Millie and Wendy had been so distracted by the whole ordeal with Carolina that they hadn't even noticed that the shower was running when they entered. They both stopped crying at that moment and looked around the room. They noticed the gigantic bed that had the covers torn off and crumpled at the foot. On the small table against the wall, they saw 2 crystal tumblers, almost empty next to a fine bottle of scotch. And then there was Jeremy, who had clearly thrown on his robe when he heard a knock at the door. And, of course, there was without a doubt someone in the bathroom who had just been showering. Millie and Wendy exchanged another glance, smirking at each other. "Jeremy, do you have someone here with you?" Wendy teased. Although they had been through such an alarming event, at the end of the day they were still teenage girls, and the idea that their classmate might be having a secret hookup was too fascinating to let go. "No, it's not like—" Jeremy started, but Millie interrupted. "Should we leave? Are we gonna ruin the mood for you two?" She was suddenly very aware of how rude it was of them to just barge into Jeremy's room in the middle of the night. "Yeah, we should go," Wendy agreed. "But first, just tell us who it is. Is it someone we know?" Millie wanted to know as well. She had never thought of Jeremy as a playboy, but maybe there was more to Jeremy than she knew. "No, you guys have it all wrong. I'm not seeing anybody," Jeremy started, but once again the girls interrupted with their gasps. "So it's just a one-night stand?" Wendy badgered. Pestering Jeremy about his possible late-night hookup was a great distraction from the real issue at hand. "Please, Jeremy, just tell us who it is and then I promise we'll leave you two alone," Wendy pleaded jocularly. Just then, the bathroom doorknob started to turn, and both girls glued their eyes to the door, waiting for the big reveal as to whom Jeremy had snuck into his room this late at night. But when the door opened, neither of the girls was prepared to find the figure that stood there. Still dripping wet from the shower, with only a small towel wrapped around his lower half, Steve Shook stood in the doorway, staring down at Wendy. Millie and Wendy stared up at Steve Shook, glistening droplets of water falling from his wet hair, down his chest to the small towel he clutched around his waist. Suddenly, Wendy felt ill. The rumpled bedding, the empty glasses of scotch. Just moments ago, she and Millie had been excited to learn the secret identity of Jeremy's late-night booty call. And now, here was Steve, standing in front of her practically naked. She didn't even know if Steve was the type to go for other men, but just the idea of him being with anyone made Wendy feel a distinct level of unease. She tried to quickly tamp it down. She didn't even like Steve anymore. What did she care who he did or did not go to bed with? That was none of her business. After all, she had dated a bit in her new school. It wasn't like she had decided to become a nun after Steve Shook broke her heart. She knew it was natural for both of them to move on. And yet seeing him here, and so very casual, Wendy's heart thumped uncomfortably in her throat. Millie looked between Steve and Jeremy in shock, then carefully asked, Are you two? Jeremy clucked his tongue. "No, we're not. I was trying to tell you that before, but you kept rudely interrupting me." "Wait, what?" Steve asked, looking between the girls and Jeremy, still kneeling on the floor. "What's going on?" Jeremy stood and faced his friend. "They thought we were hooking up." Steve looked at Jeremy and grinned. "Seriously?" Jeremy smirked back and nodded. Steve let out a loud laugh. "You think this guy is my type?" Steve flashed a glance at Wendy, then turned his attention back to Jeremy. "No offense." "None taken." Jeremy held up his hands. "But I meant what's going on, as in, what are you guys doing in Jeremy's room at 2 a.m.? Steve raised an eyebrow at the three of them. "We could ask you the same question," Wendy said. sounding much more defensive than she meant. Honestly? Steve cocked his head to the side, not sure if he should divulge to the girls. Jeremy sighed. Steve and I were trying to figure out the motive and suspects for the obvious murder earlier. I invited him to my room, and it got so late, we figured he shouldn't be wandering around back to his room with a killer loose in the building. Millie and Wendy looked at each other. Although it wasn't as juicy a piece of gossip, it did seem to make a lot more sense than Jeremy and Steve suddenly realizing they had an undeniable connection. Now, if you ladies will excuse me, I'm going to change into something a bit more presentable. Steve Shook referenced his towel, then turned to find his clothes. We know who the murderer is, Wendy blurted out. Her senses suddenly came flying back to her all at once. Steve Shook spun around, almost dropping his towel as he did. What? Who is it? Are you guys all right? Does the murderer know that you know who they are? Was it the person who was following you? Jeremy asked in a much more level tone than Steve. No. Millie shook her head. No one was following us, at least we don't think anyone was following us. She looked nervously at Wendy, who swallowed. We did bump into her in the hallway when we left our room, but we took a complicated passage to get here. Even if she had started following us, there's no way she would have been able to keep up. The words tumbled out of Wendy's mouth like a verbal waterfall. Jeremy closed his eyes and shook his head confused. Wait, who? Who did you bump into and who might have followed you? Carolina Crawford, Millie answered definitively. Carolina Crawford is the murderer. The two boys exchanged a look. You're saying that fashion-obsessed Paris Hilton wannabe is the murderer? Steve asked, making extra sure to only look Millie in the eyes. But why would she want to murder that man? What was his name again? Jeremy squeezed his eyes shut, trying to recall. Clearly, he was a little sleep-deprived from trying to solve the mystery. Gordon O'Connor, Steve answered. Right. What connection did Carolina have to him? It wasn't adding up to Jeremy. Wendy shook her head rapidly. She didn't. But that's because she wasn't trying to kill Gordon O'Connor. She was trying to murder Olivia. And she said she still plans to, Millie added. She said the only way Olivia is leaving the Perry Manor is in a body bag. Millie began to tear up again at the memory of Carolina's ice-cold words. Steve said, That's what we were afraid of. Steve looked at Jeremy. But why would Carolina want to kill Olivia? She's never even met her. Steve pondered, and suddenly he snapped his fingers, pointing at Jeremy. Could it be connected to your theory about the clan wars in the 7 families? The what? Clan wars? Wendy asked, looking at Steve, but he quickly averted his gaze. So, we all know about the 7 families. The Kongs, the Bridges, the Pells, my family, the Jarbaldis, Steve's families, the Shooks, and both Olivia's parents' families, the Johnsons and the Parks. Jeremy explained, as Millie and Wendy nodded. Well, the 7 families are more associated with America and are newer compared to the Jones and the Jorgensens, who have been around for centuries back in medieval Europe. The Jones clan hailed from Wales and the Jorgensen clan from Norway, but they both fought over territory in Northern Europe during the 1300s. Jeremy continued, It wasn't until they both ended up in America in the 1600s that they decided to call a truce. Millie and Wendy looked at each other. They knew all about the difficult relationships between and within Chris Jones and Sven Jorgensen's families. With all the drama of first cousins and second cousins, some good and others pure evil, it was impossible to keep up. But they had no idea it had gone back that far. But, as I mentioned, the 7 great families were all made in America. So the 2 clans, the Jones and the Jorgensens, decided to allow them into high society one at a time, starting with the Johnsons in the 1600s and ending with the Parks in the late 1800s. Did they make each family do a debutante ball? Wendy teased. Jeremy chuckled. I'm sure there was some sort of ceremony, but maybe not all the hoop skirts. He paused and stared off into the distance as he recalled the complicated history. After the 7 families were all integrated into the upper crust, 4 additional clans made their way to the United States from Europe too. The Goodwins, the Nevins, the Watsons, and the Crawfords. The 4 clans have always been jealous of the 7 families. Steve took over for Jeremy, stepping forward. They believe that, although they came to the United States later, they were much more established in Europe and therefore deserve to be considered at a higher level of power. But why would Carolina Crawford want to hurt Olivia, and not one of you guys then? Millie asked, desperately trying to follow along with the complicated history. Olivia has made huge waves in society in a very short amount of time, Jeremy explained. Steve and I don't really do anything that noteworthy. Steve scoffed. Speak for yourself. He walked over to the empty tumblers on the table and poured himself another finger of scotch. Olivia is also a Park and a Johnson, Steve explained, taking a sip of the smooth liquid. And the Parks were at one point the most powerful family of the 7. Plus, no one knows what happened to the Parks aside from Victoria. Jeremy continued. I mean, most likely they're dead, at least in my opinion, but if they're not, and they ever decided to come out of hiding, then Olivia could rise to power in an unthinkable kind of way. Someone as dim-witted as Carolina would take that as a threat, Steve added, taking another sip of scotch. As if the Crawfords could ever dream of getting to the level the Parks got to. But why would Carolina be so petty? Wendy looked from Jeremy to Steve, who still actively avoided her gaze. She's a spoiled brat, Steve answered, still not looking in Wendy's direction. She had a sister who died a few years ago. Some kind of boating accident or something. Jeremy shuddered, remembering the details of the youngest Crawford's death. And since the leader of the Crawford clan right now is Bonnie Crawford, Carolina's grandmother, and there aren't any other female grandchildren, she spoils Carolina. And it shows. Steve couldn't help but add the snarky remark. He had disliked Carolina from the first time he met her, when they were only 12 years old. She had screamed because he refused to give her his favorite electric toy car. And after protesting for a good 15 minutes, she smashed the car with her foot. How does she think she'll be able to get away with murder, though? Millie insisted. There was so much attention on her, it seemed impossible. Steve snorted as he poured himself another shot of scotch. You're joking, right? Millie waited for Steve to continue. But he just sipped his drink, staring off at the wall as his mind raced. She looked to Jeremy for further explanation. Jeremy sighed. The Crawfords are involved in quite a bit of less than legal activities. They're thugs, Steve blurted. Drugs, firearms, arson, you name it, the Crawfords have been involved in it. The Crawfords and the Pells are both known for being involved in shadier business, and the Crawfords take great offense that the Pell family is still considered to be one of the 7 great families. Jeremy added, They know they're no match for the Pells themselves. Apparently they have mob ties that go all the way back to Sicily, but the Crawfords are willing to take anyone else down in order to make their own way up the chain. Wow. Poor Olivia, I didn't know she was going against so much, Millie said, looking to Wendy for moral support. Do you think we should tell Olivia what's going on? Wendy asked Jeremy. He took a deep breath through his nose. I think we have to. It's best that she is prepared for the worst. Jeremy looked to Steve, who nodded in agreement. What about Chris Jones? Should we get him involved? Millie asked. Chris Jones has more ways of finding knowledge than anyone I've ever met. If you girls found out that Carolina was the murderer an hour ago, then I bet you Chris already knew an hour before that. Steve laughed and took another sip of his scotch. Just 2 floors above the worried group of friends, Chris Jones stood in a dark room, his hands wrapped tightly around the neck of a young man similar in age to Chris. Chris slammed the man's head against the wall behind him. How dare you? Chris seethed, tightening his grip around the boy's throat as he choked for air. That's my fiancé you're messing with. He slammed the man into the wall once more. Stop! A voice cried out. Chris turned, keeping his hands tight around the boy's throat. Behind him, Carolina had taken a step forward, her hands held behind her back by Sven, her face twisted in agony. "Please don't hurt my brother. I'm the one who tried to kill Olivia, not him." She had only come to her brother's room to tell him about her encounter with Cameron Pell. She had been certain that he was deaf as well as unable to speak. But now she found herself doubting this. She wanted to check with her brother to see if they needed to quickly hatch a plan to take him out as well. "No offense, Carolina, but no one is buying that you are anywhere near smart enough to come up with a plan like that." Chris Jones leaned into the boy so that his face was inches from his victim's. "Mason, on the other hand, has always been the slickest of the Crawfords, haven't you?" Mason Crawford grabbed at Chris's wrists, attempting to push him away from his throat. But Chris was too quick for him, tightening his grip so that Mason choked out in agony. Chris spat in his face. "You make me sick." "Mason!" Carolina cried out, almost ripping free of Sven's grip. Sven switched his right hand out from where he held Carolina's thin wrists together, slipping his hands into his coat pocket and pulling out a small silver pocket pistol. "Careful, darling." Sven rested the barrel of the pistol softly against Carolina's temple. "You do not want to make any loud noises, or you might startle me. And if you startle me, who knows what might happen." In Mason Crawford's bedroom, Carolina Crawford was terrified. The barrel of Sven's gun was mere millimeters from her face. She tried to hide her fear, but she was more afraid of losing than she was of dying. She was a cold-blooded killer herself. His aim still trained on Carolina. Sven glanced at her brother Mason, who Chris was holding by the throat against the wall. "Be smart, Mason," Sven said. "I know your family has gotten more and more brazen in recent years with their illicit activities because your ancient grandmother either can't tell or just puts up with it. But something tells me you're smarter than making the same crazy decisions the rest of your family does. Or, if you're not smarter than that, maybe you can get smart real quick." Chris tightened his hands around Mason's neck. "I honestly don't really care what either of you do right now. If it wasn't for some poor fool stealing Lena's eggs this morning, the one who would have died would have been Olivia. You don't deserve any mercy from us." Mason's hands scrambled uselessly at Chris's grip, choking. Chris continued, "If you dare try anything that ever puts Olivia in danger again, neither of you will leave Paris alive. Do you understand?" Chris released Mason, and he fell to the ground coughing, rubbing his skin where Chris had held him. "I understand," Mason said weakly. Sven raised an eyebrow at Carolina, waiting for her to answer too. Carolina set her jaw, hating the idea of giving an inch. But Sven waited. Carolina exhaled, then gave Sven a single defiant nod. Sven put away his gun, taking a step back from Carolina. "Bye-bye, sweet dreams," he waved. "If monsters like you even dream." Chris and Sven left the room. "Those dogs," Carolina spat, as soon as Chris and Sven were gone. Mason flew into a fit of coughing, unable to stifle it any longer. Carolina crouched beside him. "Mason, will you be okay?" Mason breathed heavily and kept trying to clear his throat. He finally recovered enough to catch his breath. "Carrie, this is not good for our family. The things you have done." "Stop! How dare you speak to me that way after we were just tortured by those stupid thugs? I don't care that you aren't happy with what I did. I'm not the problem here. It was bad luck that the tincture was diverted from Olivia and everything got found out. It was an accident." "The Jones family are not good enemies to have," Mason started, but Carolina interrupted him, exasperated with her brother. This was reminiscent of fights they'd had 1,000 times about her recklessness and his hesitation. "Mason, we were just threatened at gunpoint. The Jones family obviously doesn't remember who they're dealing with and need the fear of the Crawford family put back into them." They heard footsteps outside their door in the corridor. Carolina gasped softly and held up a finger. The footsteps passed. She lowered her voice. The Jones family needs to pay for this. Then they won't be up on their high horses for long. Carrie, are you hearing yourself? Mason studied his sister with desperate eyes. What is wrong with you? After what they just said, after what happened to us, you're already making plans about which murder plot to carry out next? Carolina never reacted well to her brother chastising her. Why are you mad at me? We're on the same side. Are we? Carolina's eyes flared with anger. She planted her feet and stared him down. Don't you dare say that. How dare you question me? You should be backing me up for what I'm trying to do for us. How can you talk to me that way? Chris Jones just laid hands on you like he's some low-class drunk in a bar fight. Save the self-righteous scolding for that Frankenstein. You're right. Mason backed off. I shouldn't have said that. Of course, we're on the same side. Carolina started pacing back and forth, contemplating. Why would Chris Jones and his lackey even come for us on Olivia's behalf anyway? What's their problem? It's not like I tried to kill one of them, it's just this. Carolina threw her hands up, rolling her eyes. Olivia Johnson, everyone is so damn in love with. Why do they care if I take her out? Because most people care about other people, Carolina. But like to a degree that makes no sense. Ugh. And once I get rid of Olivia, then we have to take out that creepy Slender Man Cameron. Besides being a pal, nobody would really want to come and beat us up about him, right? Mason rubbed his face. Carolina, you know that starting something like this would cause so much trouble for us? Way more than it's worth? What do you mean, starting something? They were the ones just bullying me. Carolina's indignation had no effect on Mason, who knew his sister well enough to know she was just trying to win this argument. She was mad, sure, but she was incapable of actually feeling bullied. Carolina narrowed her eyes at her brother. If you keep trying to stop me, I'll tell grandmother that you helped people outside the family bully me. She's already so old and weak. I think hearing that might be more than her tired little heart can take. Mason shook his head, knowing he'd already lost. The last time Carolina got caught doing something violent, their father had tried to step in and punish her for it. But Carolina had complained about the punishment to their grandmother, who forced their father to apologize to his own daughter. Mason did not understand why, but his grandmother had always preferred Carolina. Maybe they were both sociopaths, or just narcissists. Maybe Grandmother Crawford thought that someone as brutal as Carolina could run a family better than someone level-headed. Maybe she was right. Maybe she was wrong. Sven and Chris humiliated me. I want revenge, Carolina said, brushing off her clothes as though she was trying to brush off the memory of Sven's invasion of her space. That guy Sven is really casual about pulling a gun on people, too. And Chris threw you up against a wall. If they're like that in general, I don't think there would be any shortage of suspects if something happened to the two of them. Mason sighed. Even grandmother wouldn't be happy if you killed a Jorgensen or a Jones. I don't care. They need to answer for what they did, even if I don't kill Sven. I'll ruin his hands so badly they'll never heal. How dare he point a gun at me? He needs to know that he can't ever do that again and get away with it. Forget it. You're crazy, and you're driving me crazy. Go back into your room. I'm going to sleep. Mason laid back on his bed, covering his face in his hands. You're seriously going to be able to sleep tonight after what just happened? Carolina's shock was genuine. She had a full night of pacing, venting, and plotting ahead of her, and was baffled by her brother's tolerance. She was unaware, of course, that his tolerance for violence and insults had come from a lifetime of being siblings with her. Mason's voice was flat. Even if I can't fall asleep, I need to try. We're just going around in circles. If we keep going like this, I'll put you on a plane home first thing tomorrow morning. No way. You wouldn't. Carolina couldn't believe him. You would send me back without me getting the last knife from Knife God? Then all of this would have been for nothing. I won't do it. I seriously doubt your disposition is going to let you behave well enough to get the last knife from Knife God, even if you stay. Hurry back to your room. Walk back and forth and come up with new plans for how to get us deeper into trouble all you want. Get out." Carolina was now too offended to comply. "You insult me like that and think I'm just going to waltz out of here because you're sleepy? Get a grip, Mason." "Okay." Mason turned to his nightstand and picked up his phone, unlocking it. "What are you doing?" Carolina asked, a note of panic in her voice. She had no idea what her brother was up to, but she knew she wouldn't like it. "I'm reminding grandfather that he hasn't taken grandmother on a trip out of the country in a while. I think they could use a getaway with limited cell service, the way they like." "No! Ugh!" Carolina stamped a foot, feeling stuck. If her grandmother went away, then who would protect her? "Then you should leave my room. Immediately." Mason tossed his phone aside and fixed a stern look at his sister, now that she was listening again. "And please listen to me when I say that you should not cause any trouble with Olivia again. That was too close of a call already. The risk is too high and the reward is not worth it. Do you understand?" Carolina snorted bitterly. Everyone loves to say how refined and calculated you are, how you're smart and cultured and would be so great at running the family. But this isn't a strategy. It's not intelligence. You're just a coward. Mason would hate to admit it, but this stung. "Don't," he said quietly. Carolina knew she'd struck a nerve. She smiled malevolently. "You're useless. Just a wimp who's scared of Chris Jones." Mason swallowed his reaction and successfully affixed his face with a detached disregard. "Whatever you say, on the count of 3. 3, 2, fine, I'm going. Carolina smiled as she said it, satisfied that she'd gotten to take her rage out on hurting somebody tonight, even if it was just her brother. As she left Mason's room and strode out into the hallway, she slammed the door shut behind her. What a coward, Carolina thought. He's an embarrassment. Why do people think he'd be the best one to run our family someday? He cares way more about not rocking the boat than making sure our family is respected. She stormed back to her room, her mind alight with rage. Back in his room, Mason lightly touched the areas where Chris had hurt him and winced. He knew he must be bruising. He was about to rinse his injuries with cool water when his phone buzzed. Mason picked up his phone. An unknown number. He answered. "Hello?" A young man's voice was on the other end of the line. "Mason Crawford? It's me." "Steve Shook," Mason said, recognizing him. Steve cleared his throat, cutting straight to the chase. "Where's your room? I have something I need to talk to you about." Mason looked at his face in the mirror. Even in the dark, you could tell from his reflection that he wasn't in a great state to see anybody at the moment. "Steve, let's talk about it tomorrow." "No, tonight." Steve's tone was firm. "I need to talk to you right now. Or if you're not feeling very social at the moment, why don't I go find Royal Perry and have a deep discussion with him about today's murder case? I'm sure he'd be interested to hear some new details." Mason let out a long breath when he heard this. First, he had to fend off the misdirected anger of his sister, and now he could not catch a break from Steve. "We can meet." Mason gave Steve directions about how to find his room. In Steve Shook's room, he hung up the call and nodded to Jeremy and the others. "Let's go." "Okay," Jeremy answered. He turned to Millie and Wendy. "I will go with Steve. Are you too sure you want to come? Shouldn't you head to your rooms and get some sleep?" Wendy nodded. "We're coming with you." The truth was, sleep would be impossible for her that night, but she did not want to say the truth. There was no way she'd be able to sleep tonight, no matter what. There was too much death and danger lurking in the shadows. Steve and Jeremy looked to Millie and Wendy with grim determination. Millie and Wendy had just agreed to accompany Steve and Jeremy while they headed to Mason Crawford's room to discuss the day's deadly events. Steve nodded. "Okay, let's go together. We'll lead the way." The four of them gathered their things and left Steve's room. Walking up one of Perry State's grand staircases, they noticed someone descending the dimly lit staircase, and as they approached, they realized it was Carolina Crawford, who was storming downstairs toward them. When they saw who it was, the group of friends stopped in their tracks. Carolina, too, stopped and looked them over with mutual contempt in her eyes. "Well, if it isn't my favorite little clique of knife gods' retirement party. You guys are real teachers' pets if there ever were any. What are you all doing up so late?" Wendy lingered at the back of their group, clearly afraid of Carolina, which Carolina seemed to notice. She savored Wendy's fear with a smile. Steve spoke up, lying quickly. "We're just walking them to their rooms, Carolina. We all know someone dangerous could be lurking around here after what happened this afternoon." Carolina stuck out her lip in a mock pout. "Oh, it's so good you'll all have each other to help change the sheets if you wet the bed. But isn't there a little snag in your safety plan? Didn't that poor man die in the middle of a meal in front of everyone? Doesn't it kinda not matter if your friends walk you to your room at night?" There was a beat of silence. Carolina was goading them, wanting them to either get offended at her patronizing them or react with outrage at her callous mention of the man she killed. Millie took a step upstairs toward Carolina. "We have to get going." For a moment, Carolina didn't move, standing directly in front of them. It looked like she'd make them walk around her to pass. "Millie and Wendy, you have friends in such important families." Carolina finally sneered at them, breaking the silence. Steve, Jeremy, and then tentatively Wendy stepped closer to Millie in response. Carolina put on a faux cheery voice. "Good job moving up in the world. You go, girls." Carolina smiled and walked around the group, descending the stairs past them. When Carolina was safely out of earshot, Wendy let out a shudder. "She gives me the heebie-jeebies. Are we sure she's not actually a ghost who's haunting this place?" "Yeah, what a creep," Millie agreed. The four friends shook off the encounter and hurried up the stairs. Millie, Wendy, Steve, and Jeremy arrived at Mason Crawford's room and knocked softly on the door. Mason opened the door and was as stunned to see Millie's face, looking at her like he recognized her, as they were to see his bruised neck and collarbone. Steve spoke up first. "Mason, you're badly hurt. Did someone choke you?" Mason recovered his composure and smiled dryly. He stepped aside and gestured to his room. "Please, come in." "Sorry to bother you," Millie said, uncertain of the social etiquette in this odd situation and feeling extra uncomfortable in light of their host's injuries. Mason eyed Millie curiously. She looked so familiar, but I can't place from where. Or am I imagining things? Millie noticed him looking. "How do you and Steve know each other?" Steve answered. "We're old friends. We were close when we were younger." Mason chuckled. "We had a lot of fun back then. Steve's a little wild." "They were just shenanigans, that's all." Steve smiled back at Mason. The smile left Steve's face as he peered at Mason's bruises with concern. "Mason, what happened to you? Those look fresh. Did you just get these?" Mason breathed deeply, trying to decide how much he should divulge. "I don't know that it would be good for me to bother you with all this. Someone felt they had to teach me a lesson." "What the hell?" Steve was alarmed. "Who did that?" "Oh no, was it your sister? Carolina totally would. And she looked like she'd been up to something." Mason winced at the mention of Carolina. "It wasn't her, but I've already said too much. You're not going to let me stop my answer there, are you?" "Absolutely not," Steve said. "Carolina didn't do this to me, but it was because of her." Jeremy raised an eyebrow in recognition, putting the pieces together. "Carolina went after Olivia. So who would come teach you a lesson? It was Chris Jones, wasn't it?" Mason sat heavily down on his bed. Yes, okay, it was Chris. Carolina went too far this time. It makes sense that Chris was so angry." "Wow," Wendy said, shocked. "I had no idea that Chris would do that to somebody. I wouldn't have guessed that he had a side to him like this." Mason ignored that comment and instead looked back at Millie. "I can't shake this off. Who are you? I can't figure out if we know each other." Since Carolina's comment on the stairs, Millie was feeling tired of being the odd one out among her influential friends. "I know. I'm the nobody with Jeremy and Steve, who are in the 7 families, and Wendy, who's related to Chef Chang. But I'm here because I'm Olivia's friend. I came here for her." Mason cleared his throat, which was still sore. "I didn't mean to offend you, and I wasn't asking because I think you're nobody. I think you might be somebody. But speaking of your friend Olivia, I sincerely apologize for what my sister did, to the degree that I can apologize to her. I'm so sorry." "Oh, thank you so much," Millie said sarcastically. "That's what you legally have to do when someone attempts to murder somebody else, right? You just apologize and then you don't have to take any responsibility. I think I've heard that about all those people who go to jail for murder or attempted murder and say, 'I deeply apologize for the whole killing thing.' Then they get to walk right out." Mason took this all in stride, knowing her feelings were understandable. "Sorry, I understand why you're mad. I would be too." "We all know Carolina is basically the devil." Jeremy stepped in. "Mason is not, and he can't change what has already happened. What's important is what he plans to do next. So Mason, what is the plan?" "Carrie won't touch Olivia anymore," Mason said. "I made it clear she would have to deal with consequences from me if she did." "Are you sure?" Millie pressed. "If she's basically the devil, does she really care about whatever punishment you can dish out? I mean, she already faced the consequence that her plot killed a totally unrelated guy." Mason turned his gaze to Millie, grave. "I can give you my word that she won't touch Olivia again." Millie still seemed skeptical. "I hope your word means something." "It does," Mason said, still trying to figure out why Millie's face looked so familiar. "I don't know where I know you from, but it's from somewhere." Millie was also unsure. "I don't know if you look familiar. I live in New York." Mason looked thoughtful. Steve took the opportunity to look in at each of his friends, who all gave him a nod. Steve cleared his throat. "Well, I think we've all said everything we need to say for now, and heard what we needed to hear. We can leave you for the night. It's almost dawn." Mason nodded and stood, drawing a sharp breath in, clearly in pain. "Yeah, thanks for hearing me out. I'm sorry again for what my sister did." "Go apologize to Olivia," Millie blurted impatiently. "She's the one who almost died." Even though it wasn't Mason's fault, Millie did not like how passive he seemed about a matter of life and death, especially when her best friend's life was at stake. Millie grabbed Wendy's hand and pulled her to the door. "Let's go." Jeremy turned to Mason. "One last thing, Mason. Royal Perry is a smart guy, and I don't think he was fooled by Carolina's little tricks. Gordon's death was clearly suspicious and everyone knows it. Royal only might drop the whole thing for now if he goes ahead with his last knife event. But what about after that? I think it's only a matter of time before he catches your sister." Mason nodded, taking everything Jeremy said. Mason hugged Steve goodbye, and Steve, Jeremy, Millie, and Wendy left. Outside Mason's window, the dim light of the sunrise started to illuminate the room as he watched it thoughtfully. Mason dialed a number on his phone. The person who answered on the other end sounded confused. "Hello, Mason Crawford? How can I be of assistance?" "I'm going to give you a name. I need her investigated thoroughly. Report back to me as quickly as you can." "Yes, sir. Right away." Mason hung up, leaning his forehead against the window. Wendy and Millie restlessly watched the sunrise through the window of Wendy's room. Wendy was finally able to drift off to a light sleep once the sun was completely up. but then she was haunted by nightmares about Carolina. In a dream, Wendy was trapped in a huge room with many doors. She ran uncertainly from door to door, not knowing which one to choose. She opened one door and saw Carolina Crawford passing by. She gasped, ducking behind the door and shutting it as quickly as possible. She opened another door but saw Carolina again. She shut it, praying Carolina did not see her. She tried another door, then another, and another. But each time she had to shut it and could not leave because Carolina lurked just outside. Trembling, sweating, Wendy came to the last door. She mustered the courage and pulled the door open, and found herself face to face with Carolina's evil grin. Wendy screamed. But Wendy wasn't just screaming in her dream. She woke up screaming in her bed. Her scream woke Millie, who was still sleeping too. "Huh? Wendy, what's wrong? What is it?" Millie rubbed her eyes. She had slept like a rock after staying up all night. It was already close to noon. They both heard pounding on the door and jumped. Neither of them said a word. "Millie, Wendy, it's us." They heard Lena's annoyed voice from the other side of the door. "Let us in. We've been knocking on the door for like half an hour." Millie exhaled in relief. She got up off the bed, smoothed her hair, and opened the door. Lena and Olivia stood before her. Olivia looked at Millie and Wendy in bed in the room behind her, puzzled. "Why are you guys sleeping so late? I thought you were both normally pretty early risers." I don't know, just tired, I guess." Millie lied and waved them in. Come in, come in." "Yes." Lena held up her phone. "I have to show you the cutest video of the place that's watching my little bunny sent me." Lena rushed in, and Olivia followed behind. Millie was about to shut the door when Carlton Perry, who had been passing by in the corridor, perked up at this unsolicited mention of bunnies. He stuck his head into the room, slapping a hand on the door as Millie was trying to close it. "Did you say bunnies?" Carlton asked Lena, zeroing in on her. Lena was weirded out. Yeah, mine aren't here, they're back home." "You aren't a gamer, are you?" Carlton asked breathlessly. Lena looked at her friends and gulped. Carlton was undeterred by her discomfort, waiting for an answer. Olivia heard Lena think, "He is being such a creepazoid, but maybe if I just answer his question, he'll go away." Lena answered carefully, "Yeah, I play a lot of games." Carlton's eyes flashed. He had finally found Gamer Bunny Girl. "Bunnies." Carlton Perry repeated the word to himself and clenched his fists as he realized he finally found the identity of Gamer Bunny Girl. All the searching, all the questions, and all the weird looks people gave him were worth it for this moment. Lena raised an eyebrow at Carlton as he stood there with a gleam in his eye and mumbled to himself like a comic book villain. She knew this well-dressed weirdo was Royal Perry's grandson, but they had never spoken a single word to each other before. Sorry, but is there something I can help you with?" Lena took in the way he scowled at her and slowly stepped backward to get some distance. She wanted to make it clear to her friends that she'd never interacted with this guy before. Lena continued under Carlton's intense stare. "We haven't met before, right? I've had, no sleep, which is very bad for your brain after a while, so—" "Oh, I know you all right." Carlton gritted his teeth to control the anger from exploding out of him. "And I know you're a cheater. Admit it." "Huh? Are you sure I am who you think I am? You might have me confused with someone else. I have one of those faces." Lena glanced at her friends, but it was clear that Carlton was actually speaking to her. He wasn't physically very intimidating, but the level of aggression Carlton radiated at her made her nervous. "Are you Gamer Bunny Girl?" Carlton demanded. His left eye twitched slightly. "If I get one more person reacting like I'm crazy for asking about Gamer Bunny Girl, I swear to God." Lena froze. She suddenly understood she was talking to a fellow gamer, and one who figured out she was behind her username alias. She stopped smiling. So what if it is? Lena said nonchalantly. She feigned interest in a loose thread on her shirt. It is you. Carlton pointed his finger accusingly at Lena. He felt even angrier that Gamer Bunny Girl really was a young girl. How could a girl like that just beat me in 3.5 minutes? Granted, she didn't do it alone. She couldn't have. I won't leave her alone until she gives me some answers. Tell me who your accomplice is. Francis Poole. I know you both cheated somehow, and I won't let you cheaters get away with it. Lena's eyes widened. This is Greatest Knife Master? He was here the whole time and I had no idea? But he looks so regular. Not at all like what I pictured. For sounding so immature in the game, he's actually a lot older than I thought he would be. Yikes. Then another thought struck her. Wait, that means Greatest Knife Master is actually the heir to the Perry estate? I guess the username makes sense after all. But you'd think someone of his status would be a little less obnoxious. Stop calling me a cheater, Lena fired back. We beat you fair and square. Sorry if that's too much for your giant man ego. What are you, 5 years old or something? Classic, you deny it and then try to insult me instead. I'm not falling for it. Carlton was so furious now he practically felt the steam coming out of his ears. He had never been humiliated the way Gamer Bunny Girl and Francis Poole had humiliated him in his entire life. He would not forget the experience anytime soon. Carlton Perry had grown up as the grandson of the one and only knife god, and therefore the young scion of one of the most powerful families around. He was used to getting his way, and getting payback on the two fools who dared to embarrass him at his own game would be no exception. The anger flowed so intensely through him that the veins in his forehead began to bulge. At that moment, Olivia stepped forward to try and intervene. Everybody needs to take a chill pill. Do you normally just show up at your guests' doorsteps and start yelling at them, Carlton? Lena breathed a huge sigh of relief and glared back at Carlton. Olivia will make sure you regret speaking to me like this, Lena thought. Olivia was confused by this whole thing. What business does Carlton Perry, of all people, have with Lena? Olivia was quite stunned to see him look so angry. Her impression of him thus far had been that he seemed pretty cold and reserved, and not the type to get into loud arguments at random. Millie, who had backed away from Carlton, had forced the door open, now poked her head out the door behind Olivia. Do you have anything to say for yourself, Carlton? Millie had never met Carlton, but she recognized him from a photo in an article she had read about his grandfather. She had looked them up before going on this trip to the competition. Pages and pages of results came up for Royal Perry, which was to be expected since he was the greatest blade craftsman in the world and head of one of the most powerful families around. It had been much harder to dig up anything on Carlton, though she had eventually been able to learn about the tragic accident that had killed his parents. Matching that awful history to this oddly unsympathetic boy standing before them was a bit of a shock. My business is with Gamer Bunny Girl, Carlton snapped. The rest of you can leave. Wendy had been getting ready in the bathroom and now joined them at the door, wondering what all the commotion was about. What's going on out here? After everything that's happened here the last few days, I don't think it's safe to just be shouting in the hallways outside people's doors. Wendy recognized Carlton Perry as well, and thought that if anyone saw that Royal Perry's grandson was hanging around outside Olivia's room, it would attract even more jealousy and scandalous rumors for her. Just what she needs right now, Wendy thought sarcastically. Why don't you come inside for a more private discussion? She urged. Carlton rolled his eyes in frustration. Fine, let's go. He marched past them all into their room. Lena, Millie, Olivia, and Wendy all shrugged at each other, at a loss for what his problem was. There really is something in the water at the Perry estate, Olivia thought to herself as they followed him inside and shut the door. Wendy headed back into the bathroom. Some of us haven't finished trying to do our hair for the morning. Lena took a seat on the living room area sofa. With all due respect, Carlton, what's your deal? You still haven't answered my question. Who is Francis Poole? Carlton demanded. Why should I tell you? I don't even know you and you're freaking out at me over a game. Lena threw up her hands at a loss. I can't believe you've been greatest knife master this entire time. Carlton folded his arms and scowled. Olivia and Millie looked at each other in disbelief. Greatest Knife Master is a pretty obvious username choice for the grandson of Royal Perry, the greatest blade craftsman in the world, Olivia thought. Carlton seemed so serious and dignified from what I've seen, but his character and behavior in the game were so cringe. Could it really be him? No way. Millie shook her head in disbelief as she had the same thought as Olivia. Carlton Perry is the greatest knife master? Chuny boy Lena told us about? Immature delusions of grandeur or whatever? It's Chuny B.O., Lena corrected. Carlton glared daggers at Millie. I'm most certainly not a Chuny B.O. You girls don't even know what you're talking about, Carlton exclaimed. Olivia checked into Carlton's thoughts just then. This is why dumb girls shouldn't even play games. They're not real gamers. They just pretend for attention. They can't tell a skilled gamer even if one is standing right in front of them. They have no idea that any other user would give anything to have an alliance with me. They're lucky I'm even talking to them. Olivia recoiled upon hearing this. She recognized exactly what kind of guy Carlton Perry was. The tone of his thoughts dripped with misogyny. He'd been hiding it well under his respectable, quiet exterior. This jerk needs to be taken down a few notches, she thought defiantly. Oh, really? Lena rolled her eyes. Then I guess you're not the real greatest knife master after all. Don't be ridiculous. Of course I'm the real greatest knife master, obviously, Carlton snapped. Then you're really the one who said, kneel before my awesomeness, you ants? That greatest knife master? Lena grinned. Olivia could see where this was going, and she liked it. She was only in favor of taunting and ganging up on people when they deserved it. And wow, does he deserve it. That's right, Olivia nodded. The same greatest knife master who said, in your face, peasants. If you get on my good side now, I might spare you from humiliation in the future. Millie smiled. I remember some of these too. Get on my level. You all smell like hot dog water, Millie said in a mocking, arrogant, dudesy voice. I thought, who is this guy? How can he be real? I don't know, Carlton. Sounds pretty Chuny B.U. to me. Lena shrugged. Shut up, Carlton commanded, his ears turning bright red. The only thing that could be worse was if they read his private journal out loud. Oh, how about, listen up, Fives, a tennis speaking. Olivia chimed in with the same mocking voice. The girls laughed. I did not say that, Carlton snapped. I know, but you easily could have. Olivia giggled. Yes, exactly, Millie and Lena agreed. That's enough. Carlton stood to leave. This is ridiculous. Oh, don't get me started on ridiculous, Lena laughed. You actually spent time typing out, if my edgy sword of ultimate domination could speak, it would tell stories you could never understand. And then still went ahead and sent it. I remember seeing that one, Millie laughed. Then in her mind she added, and I remember definitely wanting to punch him in the face. Hearing Millie's thoughts made Olivia laugh even more. Only real men aim without iron sights, Olivia crowed in a low voice. I don't know what it means, but it sounds super cool, she teased. Shut up, all of you, Carlton snapped. His face and neck were bright red, and Olivia could hear him shouting his thoughts. Shut up, you witches. I'll never live this down. This is so much worse than losing in the game. A Chuny B.U. I'm not some idiotic adolescent boy. Well, I am an adolescent boy, but I'm not stupid. Is everyone really laughing at me all the time? Sweet, sweet justice, Olivia beamed internally. Then she put on a condescending tone and said, I guess no one has been honest with you about this, so I'll do you a tough favor. This is how cringy you sound every time you type these things in the game. Everybody's thinking it, so maybe reconsider going forward. Fine, just no more quoting me, Carlton grumbled. Just then, Wendy joined them in the room with their hair done for the day. Everything worked out? She asked pleasantly. She noticed Carlton's unhappy face. I'd say so, Millie smiled. Carlton and Lena had a game dispute to discuss. Recognition suddenly dawned on Olivia's face. Oh, no wonder Carlton asked me if I liked bunnies that time. You were looking for Lena. Seriously? You were going around asking everyone about bunnies just to find me? I think you might have a problem. Lena shook her head. Because you cheated. There's no way you just beat me that quickly. I'm the champion. Carlton pouted. You're gonna have to figure out how to live with the idea that we just beat you, because it's what happened, Lena argued. You've got to let it go. Or do you want a rematch? We'll beat your butt again. Yeah, greatest knife master versus Fat Rabbit. You'll wish you'd never found her, Olivia declared. Lena's eyes widened, and Olivia's face fell as she realized what she had just accidentally revealed. Carlton gasped. Wait a minute. Lena is also Fat Rabbit? You're Fat Rabbit? Carlton's already pale skin turned an even ghostlier white. Without even realizing it, Carlton stood up and stared at Lena in disbelief. Fat Rabbit is a girl? Lena shifted uncomfortably under Carlton's incredulous stare. She rolled out her eyes at the way he squeaked, girl. Yes, I'm a girl, big frickin' deal. Is it really so hard to believe? I mean, honestly, what year is it? Carlton was still reeling from this shocking discovery. The Fat Rabbit. One of the best-known players of the game. A girl. Everyone in the forums always believed that Fat Rabbit had to be some repulsive nerd who had no life and never left their computer. A full-blown otaku. Carlton attended many award ceremonies and gamer events, and he realized he never actually saw Fat Rabbit's face, not even a strand of hair. Whenever Fat Rabbit showed up to things, they wore a big, oversized costume and hid their face under a rabbit mask. Now that he thought about it, Fat Rabbit never spoke much either. Wearing costumes and masks like that wasn't unusual in the gaming circles he ran in, though, so no one found Fat Rabbit's outfit strange. The anonymity had been part of the mystique. People whispered their theories all the time, but no one ever mentioned the possibility of Fat Rabbit actually not being a guy. I always pictured one of those guys who has no friends, no social life outside of short appearances at the game events, and definitely isn't the host of any events, Carlton said. Whenever there was a gathering for high-level players, Fat Rabbit always qualified in skill and notoriety, but they never participated. Now you know why, Lena said, because people would get super freaking weird about it. Carlton kept shaking his head, speaking in almost hushed tone like his whole world had been shattered. It was so strange to blow off all those kinds of invitations, so everyone thought Fat Rabbit was just some anti-social loser who couldn't bear to be seen in real life. It made sense for someone like that to prefer being at home just playing games all the time, the one place they had respect and power. The more that person stayed home and played games, the better and better they became. That was the only explanation for Fat Rabbit's skills. Olivia laughed coldly at that. The only explanation? You seriously couldn't fathom that maybe, just maybe, a girl could be that good? Carlton shook his head slowly. The reality of who he saw in front of him now completely shattered all those theories that were years in the making. Lena was nothing like an otaku, or even what he expected from most above-average gamers. Maybe lots of other players were secretly girls, too. He blinked and took another good look at Lena. Not only was she not repulsive, she was actually rather cute. Her big eyes were especially pretty, and her skin looked soft. He never thought of gamers as having soft skin, not even himself. Carlton had raged so much at the mental image of his enemy that seeing her look so normal and pleasant was deeply confusing for him. Yes, Lena is Fat Rabbit, Olivia said, trying to break Carlton out of his stunned silence. She's definitely not a cheater. Fat Rabbit is really good, right? You weren't beaten by just a nobody. Doesn't that feel a little bit better? And it doesn't matter if she's a girl. All that's supposed to matter are her skills, and we all know she has them. Yeah, Carlton croaked. His throat had gone totally dry. Just from looking at him, it was difficult to tell if he was shocked or angry. He frowned deep in thought, and that didn't help either. After some time, Carlton finally cleared his throat. I still have one question. Depends on what it is, Lena said wearily. Why did you create the Gamer Bunny Girl account and username and pretend to be a new player? Why not play as Fat Rabbit? Olivia met Lena's eyes as if to tell her she didn't have to tell Carlton her reason for creating Gamer Bunny Girl. She created it in order to anonymously interact with Francis, but no one else needed to know that. Lena nodded to Olivia and thought carefully before answering. Personal reasons. Lots of people have other accounts just to switch it up and try something new. I'm surprised you haven't tried that yourself. Don't you ever get tired of being Greatest Knife Master? I never get tired of being Greatest Knife Master. Carlton answered a little too quickly and completely seriously. Olivia suppressed a laugh. But who is Francis Poole? Carlton asked. You said just one question, Lena reminded him. She nervously tapped her toes inside her shoes. You keep avoiding the question, is he your boyfriend? Carlton pressed. He figured something like that would make sense. As a pair, they had worked really well together in the game and had played as a team for some time now. Lots of people in the game started relationships with their avatars, so it wouldn't be entirely surprising if that was the case here. Lena's poker face started to crack at the mention of boyfriends. Me? Boyfriend? Like a guy? She laughed nervously. She really, really liked Francis and dreamed about him being her full-fledged boyfriend all the time. But she couldn't say that out loud. It was still a little too soon to call him that. Then again, it'll happen sooner or later anyway, she thought. I guess he's kind of my boyfriend, Lena mumbled sheepishly. Her pale cheeks flushed and her heart fluttered. Millie, Olivia, and Wendy exchanged knowing looks. There she goes again, Millie said to them quietly. She's hopeless. Then just tell me who he is, Carlton pleaded. Is he here at the Perry estate? Just give me a clue. No, I won't tell you because then you'll just harass him the way you've done with me. Lena crossed her arms. Just let it go. And I bet even if you rematched him one-on-one, you'd still lose. So there's no point in getting all worked up. It'll just make you feel worse. She shrugged. Lena thought about how much she admired Francis's style as a player. Carlton Perry was all talk and hype, but Francis really had the skills to win. Carlton hung his head. Well then, sounds like those are all the answers for today. Anything else we can do for you, Carlton? If not, we're going to have lunch. Wendy interjected firmly. This had gone on long enough, and she was starting to really feel hungry. Hashing out drama from a video game wasn't exactly her cup of tea. Besides, who gets this upset about things that didn't even happen in real life? I'll go too. Carlton stood up to follow them. Even if Lena wouldn't tell him who her gaming boyfriend was at this moment, he intended to figure it out. They all stood up to leave. Lena looked Carlton dead in the eyes with the most intimidating gaze she could muster. Before we leave this room, Carlton, I'm warning you. You can't tell anyone the real identity of Fat Rabbit. I don't want anyone to know it's me. I like being anonymous, and I know you can understand that. If you even so much as whisper to one of your dogs, I will tell the world that Carlton Perry is Greatest Knife Master. Got it? You wouldn't dare. Carlton gasped. Oh, I absolutely would dare. Trust me, if you fool around, you will find out. Lena narrowed her eyes and walked right up to Carlton. And I have screenshots of every cringy in-game message you've ever posted. It'll take me 30 seconds to send every member of the entire Perry family a copy. Don't try me." Carlton backed away in horror. "No, you are absolutely horrible. Evil. What a nightmare." Lena really tried to lay it on. Keeping her identity secret was extremely important, so she had to put fear in him. "That's right, and don't you forget it. Nightmare is, what my friends call me. They all know not to cross me." Wendy subtly glanced at Olivia and Millie as if to ask, "Really?" Millie and Olivia quietly shook their heads no. Olivia enjoyed seeing Lena take so much control. It's great that she learns this now while she's young, instead of when it's too late. Lena stuck out her chin with attitude and reached up to pat him on the shoulder. "Do we have a deal, Mr. Perry?" Carlton gulped and nodded. "Deal," Carlton grumbled. She had him backed into a corner by threatening his greatest knife master identity. He would have to keep her secret so that she kept his. It's really too bad, Carlton thought. Just imagine the looks on people's faces if they found out Fat Rabbit was this girl. Good. Let's go get some food, Lena told the others, then had another thought. Actually, you all go ahead. Olivia and I just need to tidy something up, but we'll meet you down there. I know you're all starving. Thank you, Wendy sighed. She was really hungry now and had wanted to leave for a while. Video games sound like a really dramatic business. I still haven't showered or anything, Millie sighed. I'll catch up with you later. Later, while Millie was still getting ready, Olivia and Lena caught up with the others in the temporary ballroom turned dining hall. The actual dining hall was still closed off for the crime scene investigation. Even if it wasn't closed down right now, it was still too haunted by the murder that took place there. None of them wanted to go back there anytime soon anyway. The beautiful ballroom was a nice substitute they didn't mind living with. This looks delicious, Wendy said as she pointed at a big serving dish full of colorful vegetables arranged in a pretty spiral. That's ratatouille. It's zucchini, peppers, tomatoes, eggplant, some herbs and spices, and looks like onions and garlic. The key is cutting all of the vegetables as uniformly as possible and frying them separately in olive oil so you can taste each individual vegetable flavor. Oh, wow, sounds good to me. Wendy nodded and scooped a steaming spoonful onto her plate. Hey, guys, a girl's voice said from behind them. Olivia turned to see Bella Bridges in a cute blue dress, smiling and waving at them. Her personal butler, Aiden, wearing a tuxedo, hovered behind her. Aiden nodded at Olivia. A tuxedo is a bit much, Olivia thought. Hi, Bella, Olivia said warmly. Bella tilted her head curiously. I didn't see you all at breakfast this morning. Is everything okay? Olivia nodded kindly. She didn't want to worry Bella, so she kept her explanation vague. Everything's fine. We were all up talking pretty late last night. By the time we woke up this morning, we had already missed breakfast. Oh, wow, that sounds fun, actually. Bella couldn't help but feel a little jealous. The others her age got to do things like stay up all night and do whatever they wanted. Her family was so strict. She always had her work and rest schedule planned down to the minute. She never had the chance to talk with friends until the sun came up, just because she felt like it. Her big, round eyes sparkled just thinking about how fun it would be. Why don't you eat lunch with us, Bella? Olivia offered, still smiling. Bella's face lit up. I would love that. Olivia was so kind to her and made her feel like she actually had a friend. She admired Olivia so much. In some ways, she wished she could be Olivia, or at least live her life and enjoy freedom in a similar way. Olivia got to do whatever she wanted, whenever she wanted. She just had that attitude. Bella would give anything to have that. Have a seat, Miss Bella. I'll get your meal for you, Aiden said firmly. Bella's face fell. I can't even pick out my own lunch, she thought sadly. Olivia heard this thought and felt sad for the stifled girl. Okay, thank you, Aiden, Bella said. She smiled at Olivia and the others self-consciously. Aiden bowed and went to the end of the food line. Bella followed Olivia and the group to a table. What's all that money worth if you can't even decide what you want to eat? No thanks, Lena muttered to herself. She grabbed an extra bread roll and quietly raised it up to the sky. To freedom, she whispered before following the others to the table. If they control what she eats, Lena thought, what else does Bella's family control about her life? Poor Bella. It seems like her family is really strict, Olivia said as she scooped up a helping of potato salad from the lunch buffet and placed it on her plate. Whose family is really strict? Steve Shook popped in obliviously behind them at the lunch buffet and swiped the last souffle before Lena could get one. Any family that has too many rules just thinks it allows them to look down on the rest of us. He shrugged. Steve, hey. Lena frowned. That souffle was gonna be mine. Steve was already heading back to his table and didn't pay attention. Lena rolled her eyes. Olivia felt bad for Lena and quickly had an idea. Here, have mine. Olivia picked up the souffle off of her own tray and placed it on Lena's tray. I can't take yours, Olivia, Lena protested, but Olivia waved it off with her hand. I thought it was going to be vanilla, but I realized too late it's actually lemon. I regretted it as soon as I took it. You'll be doing me a favor so I don't have to eat it or let it go to waste. Are you sure? Lena asked. How could Olivia not like lemon? As long as you weren't going to eat it, okay, thanks. Steve's lucky this time. Lena side-eyed him from across the room. As we were saying, I feel bad for Bella too. She's the same age as us, but she doesn't get to make any of her own decisions. If I had to live like that, Wendy thought about it and shuddered. It would be too long before I got depressed from feeling so caged up. I can imagine, Olivia agreed. Olivia always vaguely knew that Bella was carefully protected by the Bridges family. Wealthy families often needed extra protection, so it wasn't unheard of. But Olivia saw now that extra protection like that could quickly become a slippery slope toward living like a prisoner. I feel bad for her too. She tries to stay pleasant, but sometimes it's obvious that she's pretty miserable about always missing out on things. Francis agreed with a sigh. He turned and noticed Carlton Perry standing nearby them in silence the whole time. Carlton Perry? Hanging around us? Since when did that start? I didn't think any of us knew him. Weird. Here, you should try these scallops, Lena insisted as she added some to her plate. She waved Olivia and Wendy over and added some to their plates as well. Suddenly, Steve had returned. I'll try some, he said, holding out his plate. Really? Lena scoffed with a hand on her hip. What? Steve looked at her cluelessly. Lena rolled her eyes at him and put some on his plate too. Thanks, Steve grinned. You owe me a souffle. Lena lightly punched him in the arm and they both laughed. Anything for you, Lena? Steve played along. Carlton Perry narrowed his eyes at Steve Shook, looking back and forth between him and Lena. The wheels turned in Carlton's head. These two are acting awfully friendly with each other. Could this be Fat Rabbit, aka Gamer Bunny Girl's secret boyfriend? Carlton frowned at Steve, trying to decide if he seemed like the gamer type. He doesn't look like what I expected. But then again, I couldn't have been more wrong about Gamer Bunny Girl actually being a girl. If this is her secret boyfriend, then he must be her accomplice who beat me in the game. Francis was still watching Carlton and wondering why he was with them in the first place. Even stranger, Carlton had an eerie stare trained on Lena and Steve that sent chills down Francis's spine. Was Carlton a friend? Or possibly an enemy? After the recent murder, nothing could be ruled out as impossible. Guess I have to keep an eye on Carlton Perry. Things are getting so crazy around here that we can't even trust the host. The group finished filling their plates and made their way back to a large table to sit down. Olivia glanced around the room, searching for someone. Looking for Chris? Wendy teased. Not at all. Olivia rolled her eyes at Wendy. I was wondering if Millie had come down yet. Seems like she's taking a longer time than usual, doesn't it? I thought she'd have joined us by now. Oh, don't worry. I heard her say today was a hair wash day for her, and she takes it pretty seriously, so that's going to add a lot of time. Wendy reassured her. I wanted to tell you, but Wendy trailed off. She had been about to bring up the Crawford family, but right at that moment, she saw none other than Carolina Crawford walk in with her housekeeper, Madeline Defarge. Wendy shrank in her seat and kept her eyes down as fear crept over her. The memory of her recent nightmare flashed through her mind. Even while she was awake, it scared her to think of it. What were you saying? Olivia looked up at Wendy after she had trailed off mid-sentence and saw that Wendy looked really uncomfortable. She didn't look up at Olivia or Lena. Olivia looked around the room and spotted Carolina Crawford's piercing eyes watching her. You got lucky with the poison once. Carolina spat in her thoughts. Olivia frowned and recoiled. The venomous thought was so loud and hateful, it rang painfully in her brain. Olivia looked back at Carolina as she kept on walking, processing what she had just heard. So this is the one who tried to poison me. There's nothing I can do about it right now. I have to stay calm and act normal. Wendy, are you all right? Steve asked with sudden concern. He saw Wendy's hand was trembling, and without thinking, he reached his hand out and gently placed it on hers. Wendy kept her eyes down but felt Steve's warm palm on the back of her hand. Admittedly, it was comforting, but she didn't want to confess things. She quietly moved her hand away from Steve's as if it had not happened. Steve pulled his hand back, embarrassed that he had scared her off like that. He felt a little disappointed she had reacted that way. But what did he expect? He had royally screwed up in the past, and he didn't deserve a second chance. He appreciated her discretion and followed her lead, carrying on as if nothing happened. He cleared his throat and took another bite of food. Unfortunately, one person had in fact witnessed Steve and Wendy's little hand touch. Carlton Perry looked dumbfounded at what he just saw. Isn't Steve Lena's boyfriend? He thought with a flare of righteous indignation. He shouldn't be grabbing other girls' hands. Does Lena know about this? Is that why he owes her a souffle? What is going on? Her skilled game partner is nothing but a scumbag in real life. Carlton turned to peer at Lena curiously. She hadn't seen anything at all and continued talking softly to Olivia. This poor girl defends his secret identity so loyally and doesn't even know what's happening right under her nose. Meanwhile, Olivia tried to seem normal as she chatted with Lena, even though she was distracted by Carolina Crawford. Just then, Millie finally entered the ballroom. She walked to them and sat on Olivia's other side to join in their conversation. Hey guys, Millie waved as she sat down. Your hair looks nice, Lena said in awe. Thanks, it's a wash day, Millie said as she touched her hair self-consciously. I see Carlton's still here. They shrugged and glanced at him. Carlton did not notice, as he was busy being fascinated by Steve and Wendy's odd behavior. Steve seemed to be very interested in Wendy, even though he was Lena's boyfriend. But Wendy did not seem to like it very much. Carlton couldn't understand it. His thoughts continued to race. You already have a girlfriend, man. Just leave this one alone. How does Lena not see this? It's all right there. Wendy set her fork down, even though there was still some food left on her plate. I really didn't get much sleep last night, and I don't feel so good. I'm going to head back up to the room and rest. Wendy stood up from her chair and politely smiled before leaving. Steve noticed Wendy still looked unsettled. Is she upset with me about my hand-touching fiasco? He couldn't take the guilt and wanted to clear things up in private. After all, misunderstandings were what got him in trouble in the past. I'm pretty tired too. I'm going to do the same. I'll catch up with you all later, Steve said quickly. He made his way out after Wendy. The others still sat at the table chatting and eating dessert. Carlton watched Steve go after Wendy and looked back at Lena enjoying her souffle. This was so unfair to her, he thought. He couldn't take it any longer. You're just going to let him go after another girl like that? Carlton blurted at Lena. The table fell silent. Who, Steve? Lena answered, confused. Whatever his name is, isn't he... Your boyf—" Carlton asked, exasperated. No, Carlton, you're confused. Lena talked over Carlton. Her face turned bright red. I told you not to talk about that here. She laughed nervously and glanced in Francis's direction. Francis wasn't exactly up to speed on their relationship status outside of their gaming characters. He didn't even know Lena was his digital companion yet. If Carlton spills the beans now, I will die, Lena thought frantically. First I'll kill him, and then I will die. How can you be so blind? Carlton asked in frustration. Shh, we'll talk about this later, Lena whispered desperately. Francis heard Lena's words and understood. Lena must have a boyfriend, but she's shy and doesn't want us to all know. I'll give her some space. I need to head back up to my room anyway. I've got some tidying to do. Francis fibbed. He smiled and left the table. Lena sighed. Her thoughts were spiraling. Please, please, I hope he didn't hear that. Carlton was not finished. You must be kidding yourself. Carlton thought that Lena's evasiveness was coming from wishful thinking that Steve wasn't a bad guy. The poor woman is in denial, he thought. At the same time, Lena mistakenly thought that Carlton figured out Francis wasn't really her boyfriend and she had overstated their relationship. Be honest with yourself, Carlton urged. And then in his mind he added, that Steve is a scoundrel. Lena, feeling caught, put her face in her hands. Francis and I aren't technically boyfriend-girlfriend yet, but it's getting close. But I can't let Carlton know about any of that. She sighed, then said, it will happen sooner or later. I just need more time. More time? Stop dragging it out. Have some self-respect, Carlton grumbled, thinking she intended to put off breaking up with the cheating Steve shook. Lena gasped. You are so forward. You don't understand the whole situation, so mind your own business. Lena held up her hand defensively. You're right. This is none of my business. I don't know why I said anything. Live your life. Carlton stood up and left in a huff. Lena looked around at Millie and Olivia, who had been stunned in silence the whole time. What got into him? He really is crazy and rude. Lena shook her head. Meanwhile, in an empty corridor, Steve caught up with Wendy. Wendy, he called out to her. She glanced back at him and turned away to keep walking. Wendy, I'm really sorry for what I did back there. I wasn't thinking. I was just worried about you, but I shouldn't have done it. Steve apologized nervously. Wendy could see he meant it, but he had no idea what he was talking about. Oh, I appreciate that, but this isn't about you. I'm fine. Steve took one step forward. You looked like a trapped kitten back there. I saw you actually shivering. What's wrong? Wendy finally looked Steve in the eyes. She saw the sincere pleading in them. A part of her wanted to confide in him, to let him comfort her. But she also remembered all the emotional pain and how hard she had tried already to move on. Can I trust him again after everything that happened? I can't tell you what's wrong, Wendy said quietly, and I think you know why. Steve's heart sank. He knew exactly what she meant. We don't have to talk about this anymore. I'm fine, and you don't have to worry about me. I don't want your help. I'm just gonna go. Wendy hesitated. Even with all the distance and time, being around Steve was still painful. Wait, Steve insisted. He frowned at the floor and then looked right into Wendy's eyes. I should have said this a long time ago, and I should have done it when you showed up here, but I'm so sorry about everything. I was an idiot. I'm still an idiot, but that's not an excuse. I know what happened with the letter really hurt you. Making it into some big joke and using it to get what I wanted was an awful thing to do. It's the biggest mistake of my life. You don't have to forgive me, and I don't deserve it, but I want you to at least know that. Wendy couldn't believe what she was hearing. She had spent so much time healing and focusing on the fact that Steve wasn't worth the space he took up in her brain, that he was completely irredeemable. In a lot of ways, hating Steve had been comforting, easier than missing him. His apology was like a giant wave crashing into the emotional wall she built so carefully. Wendy turned his words over in her mind and took a careful breath. "Thank you for saying that. You deserve a lot better," Steve said quietly. Wendy felt a flicker of her old feelings somewhere deep in her heart. The feeling filled her with apprehension. Everything in her wanted to run from that feeling. "Whatever is going on with you, you can tell me. Or I hope you have someone you can tell. It doesn't have to be me. I just want you to be okay. I'll leave you alone now, I promise." Steve sadly turned to go. "I had a nightmare," Wendy blurted. "Last night it really scared me. I couldn't sleep at all. Then at lunch just now, when I saw Carolina, I remembered the nightmare was about her. I knew it wasn't real, but all of a sudden I was terrified." Wendy suddenly felt a lump catch in her throat. Maybe it was the lack of sleep, the stress of worrying so much about her friend Olivia, or riding the emotional roller coaster that was Steve ever since she got here. But tears threatened to escape from her eyes. She felt more confused than she ever had about her feelings now. Her face grew hot with shame and anger. "Oh my God, don't get all weepy right now, not in front of Steve. How much more mortifying can this conversation get?" The more she tried to fight the lump in her throat, the worse it got. Steve saw that something behind Wendy's eyes had just cracked. He took a few steps towards her, but didn't want to scare her away. "Whatever was in your nightmare, I won't let it come true," Steve promised. It was too much for Wendy. She wanted to run away and run towards Steve at the exact same time. Had he really changed while she was away? "Thanks for saying that," Wendy tried to say casually, but the lump in her throat betrayed her. Before she could stop it, tears fell down her cheeks. She cursed herself for crying when she didn't want to. She hated being one of those people who involuntarily cried when they got angry or embarrassed. This is so humiliating. Wendy frowned and tried to wipe at her eyes to hide her tears. "I don't know why I'm crying. This is so dumb. I'm fine, really." Steve couldn't stand to see her so upset and so frightened. All of a sudden, he was carefully putting his arms around her to comfort her. "It's okay, Wendy." Wendy's thoughts reeled. Steve was the last person I wanted to talk to. But right now, I feel safe. She sniffed and gingerly wrapped her arms around him, too. Steve's heart pounded in his chest. Is Wendy really hugging me back right now? Wendy could hear Steve's heart beating loudly with her ear against his neck. She remembered how badly she used to want to be this close to him. How many times she had imagined his arms around her, and her arms around him. Steve felt Wendy's hair brush against his chin, and he noticed that she smelled like flowers and vanilla. He tried to put it out of his mind. She just needs a friend right now, he reminded himself. Wendy sniffled and looked up at Steve, laughing at herself. Sorry. Their eyes met and she trailed off. Their faces were so close. For a moment, Wendy forgot about all of her anger and resentment. She closed her eyes and leaned in slowly until their lips lightly touched. It was simple and sweet. Steve shut his eyes and kissed her back. I don't know what's happening, but if this is a dream, I don't want to wake up. Wendy opened her eyes and leaned away from Steve. Part of her was happy, and her stomach felt fluttery. But she also felt the hair on her arms and the back of her neck stand on end. She had no idea what she wanted, but she wasn't supposed to want Steve anymore. The kiss felt nice, but she didn't understand what made her do it after everything she had been through. She was more confused than ever, and she felt dizzy trying to make sense of it. Steve searched her eyes. He couldn't tell if she was happy or wanted to run away. Their arms were still around each other, and she didn't move a muscle. Ahem. Someone pointedly coughed down the hall. Wendy and Steve snapped their heads in the direction of the sound to see Carlton Perry trying to hide behind a grandfather clock. Carlton Perry? Steve called out to him. Were you watching us? The interruption was like a bucket of cold water dumped on Wendy, and she jumped away from Steve like a hot stove. Shame flooded her from head to toe. Why did I do that? She had no idea. Her heartbeat pounded in her eyes and the air around her felt thin. Steve tried not to feel stung by Wendy leaping away from him so fast. A million questions raced through his mind. What did she want from me? Of course I wasn't watching you. This is a public hallway you chose to mess around in my house, Carlton snapped. He stepped out from behind the grandfather clock and looked at them with disgust. Seriously, what does the great fat rabbit see in this guy? It's not like that, Steve argued, his face flushing. Wendy's emotions were all over the place, and she felt panic rising in her chest. I've got to go. I can't be here right now. I'll see you guys later. Wendy couldn't meet Steve's eyes. She desperately staggered away down the hall as quickly as she could, despite how much her legs had turned into jelly. Wendy! Steve called after her, but she did not turn around. His cheeks burned. I've made things so much worse. Steve turned back to Carlton. Can I help you? Steve asked impatiently. No thanks. I'm good. I don't know why you're annoyed with me. You're the one who needs to have a little restraint the next time you try to cheat on your girlfriend in the middle of other people's homes. Carlton scolded. The Perry family is not impressed with two-timing scumbags. Wait, what? Steve reeled. What the hell is this guy talking about? Two-timing scumbag? Steve asked, utterly flabbergasted. You must have me confused with someone else. Also, update your insults, man. Carlton straightened his jacket and turned away dismissively, shaking his head. Take care of yourself, Steve. Carlton marched away fuming. Steve was really at a loss. What is going on? What was he talking about? A girlfriend? I don't have a girlfriend. Steve remembered that Wendy had already hurried away. He desperately wanted to talk to her and understand what that kiss was about. I have to tell her how I really feel. No more misunderstandings. He hurried off in the direction she left. As soon as Wendy had turned the corner, she ran all the way back to her room. Her heart was racing and she wanted to crawl out of her skin. I can't believe I kissed Steve. What was I thinking? Why did he hug me and kiss me back? I thought he didn't feel that way about me. This is so messy. Wendy bounced back and forth between anger at Steve and floating on air. The fact it felt good made her even more miserable. Then an even worse thought entered her mind. What if he only kissed me back out of awkwardness? Oh my God. Wendy died inside as she ran up the stairs to her room. She ran as if she could escape the mortification that chased her. I just need to get back to my room before anybody sees me like this. This castle has so many flights of stairs. She finally saw her room at the top of the last flight of stairs. Wendy ran for it, but she was so distracted by her thoughts and feelings that she misjudged the height of the last step. Her foot slipped up off the edge of the rug-covered stone, and she staggered backward. She felt herself falling, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Well, now I don't have to die of embarrassment. They'll just find me at the bottom of these stairs, she thought solemnly. Just as Wendy had accepted her fate, someone suddenly darted in front of her and caught her by the waist. Wendy, watch out! Wendy cried out in surprise. It happened so fast that she couldn't tell whose arms she was safely wrapped in. She looked up to see it was Dusty holding her back from falling down the stairs. Her eyes grew wide in shock. That was close. Dusty chuckled. He looked at her face and noticed her distress. Are you all right? Why were you running? Dusty, Wendy blinked and shook from the adrenaline that still coursed through her. Dusty kept his arms around her for fear that she might collapse. She seemed so pale and anxious. You don't have to explain right now, just, take some deep breaths, Dusty said encouragingly. He wasn't sure what to say to Wendy. He was a man of action, not so much a man of comforting words. He had much more experience with throwing punches than making people feel better. She still looked very shaken. Not knowing what else to do, he gingerly patted her on the back like a child. There, there. Was that the right thing to say? Wendy's head spun. The adrenaline rush overwhelmed her, and she felt her knees buckle. Dusty, I need to go to my room, she breathed faintly. Dusty nodded and effortlessly lifted her into his arms, cradling her against his chest. Wendy's stomach lurched, and a wave of nausea rippled through her. Oh, no, hang on, put me on the ground quick, she begged. Dusty didn't want to place her down on the hard floor. Thinking quickly, he carefully knelt down until he was seated, still holding her against him. Wendy felt better. Thank you. Wendy smiled weakly. Keep it together, Wendy, she thought. Don't barf until you get back to your room. Suddenly, she heard footsteps running up the stairs towards them. Wendy, what is this? A voice cracked in despair. Wendy dreaded opening her eyes to see who it was. Please, anyone but him. Wendy's eyes fluttered open, and she saw Steve staring wide-eyed back at her, curled up in Dusty's arms. Then her vision faded, and she passed out from exhaustion. Steve approached carefully, sizing Dusty up. What the hell? Was his immediate thought. Who was this guy? He seemed about Chris's age, maybe a year older than them, and Steve could tell that he dressed and acted like someone in private security. Why was Wendy asleep in his arms? Steve was especially confused and on alert since he and Wendy just had a romantic moment. Now she's cuddling with some other guy? Who are you? Steve demanded. Who are you? Dusty shot right back. Dusty wasn't trying to look friendly either. His arms were around Wendy as he was sizing Steve up himself. Dusty had found Wendy very upset, so he guessed that her distress must have had something to do with this guy, and wasn't in the mood to give Steve the benefit of the doubt. Dusty and Steve faced off silently as Wendy slept. She was sound asleep, but her brows were furrowed in a frown. Her eyes were still red and puffy, and tears stuck to her lashes. It was clear she had been crying. Her head and hands were against Dusty's chest. Dusty finally broke the silence. I don't know what you did, but stay away from her. His demeanor was cold. But this guy just seemed to be some security guard, so Steve felt comfortable talking back. What right do you have to tell me to stay away from her? Wendy suddenly groaned in her sleep, and both men froze. She stretched her shoulders a little uncomfortable, and Dusty raised his arms. She turned over, nuzzling her face into Dusty's chest, and was still again. Dusty replaced his arms on Wendy and locked eyes with Steve again. I'm the one who comforted her after you made her upset. Is that enough qualification for you? Steve gritted his teeth and stared Dusty down angrily. You don't know anything about what happened between us. I didn't do anything wrong. Steve? Dusty, what are you doing? Olivia asked as she and Millie approached. Olivia and Millie were smiling oblivious as they took in the sight of Steve and Dusty glaring at each other with silent fury, and Wendy sleeping. At the mention of Steve's name, a flash of dim recognition flared in Dusty's mind. Wendy hadn't spoken about Steve in all the time he'd been watching out for her, but he recalled that name being mentioned in the airport when Olivia saw Wendy off. So this guy had something to do with Wendy leaving New York, Dusty thought, trying to piece things together. His line of thought was disrupted by Steve shrugging off Olivia's question. Steve answered them. Nothing. It's fine. Dusty gave Olivia a respectful nod. Miss Johnson? Steve turned to Millie and Wendy and gestured to Dusty. So you know this guy? Millie approached Wendy and spoke softly. Yeah, did something bad happen? Is Wendy asleep? Olivia nodded. Yeah, she's exhausted from crying. I've seen this a lot of times, unfortunately. When she gets really upset about something and cries, then she gets so tired she falls asleep. Olivia had been there for Wendy when they were younger in New York, and Wendy was humiliated by her father's issues with money. Olivia held Wendy on her bedroom floor as Wendy cried and fell asleep in Olivia's arms. It happened throughout the years they were best friends. Millie gestured toward the room. Let's get into the room to talk. It seems like this is a private conversation. Dusty lifted Wendy easily as Steve bristled. Dusty carried Wendy gingerly into Wendy's room and placed her on the Perry's vast, luxurious guest bed. Wendy, still asleep, squirmed and grabbed at Dusty's clothes, not wanting to be put down. Steve huffed, shook his head, and turned away annoyed. Dusty sat beside Wendy and maintained a comforting presence against one of her legs as she nestled into the bed. Olivia and Millie exchanged a pointed look. It was obvious there was some odd tension between Dusty and Steve, and they still didn't know why Wendy had been crying. They trusted Dusty and Steve separately, and weren't sure what to make of all this. At that moment, Lena obliviously bounded into the room. She spoke loudly at first. "Hey guys, whoa, Steve? Dusty?" Noticing Wendy asleep in the bed, she lowered her voice. "Sorry, I didn't know she was sleeping in here. How is she sleeping so much?" The men glanced at each other, neither wanting to say anything yet. Millie cautiously spoke up. "We did fall asleep after the sun came up this morning. I guess she's still tired." She figured she would buy everybody some time while they decide how to come clean. Lena was more confused than ever. That didn't explain much else about the scene before her. "What is with the weird vibe in here? I need everybody to stop being the strong, silent type and spill stat." Lena zeroed in on Steve. "Steve, I've never seen you have such a major stink face. Are you smelling something bad? Is it me?" Steve shut his eyes impatiently, annoyed. "No, I'm not smelling anything bad, Lena." He turned his gaze pointedly to Dusty. "Except maybe a rat." Olivia and Millie raised their eyebrows. They loved Lena, but this was a pretty socially unaware way to approach the tense air in the room. Millie looked around at everyone. She trusted all of these people and thought that maybe she could get some information about what was going on if she shared what she knew so far. She cleared her throat. "Lena, Olivia, I actually still need to fill you two in on what happened last night." Lena snapped into seriousness, and Olivia perked up, curious. "This can't be good." Millie sat in one of the plush brocade chairs in the room, running her hands over the pattern. "Well, no, it's not good. We ran into Carolina Crawford last night, and she seems to have no remorse about anything. She seemed to enjoy intimidating us." Steve sighed. "Yeah, she is bad news. I'm actually friends with her brother Mason from when we were kids, and she's always been like this. I wanted to talk to him to see if there's anything he can do to keep everyone safe." Millie looked doubtful. "Olivia, we made him promise that she wouldn't make an attempt on your life again. He did promise, but Steve, I know he's your friend, but I don't know how much I believe he can actually control her." "He gave us his word," Steve said with an edge to his voice. Millie did not seem convinced, but did not argue with Steve. Jeremy pointed out to Mason that pretty much everyone knows Gordon O'Connor's death must not have been an accident, and Royal Perry isn't the kind of guy who will give up on trying to find out who did it, even if he takes a break to finish out this competition. Steve chimed in. He's certainly not short on the resources needed to hunt Carolina down either. Millie still looked worried. I don't know if hearing that would deter her or make her feel like she's got nothing to lose by continuing on with her plans. There was a silence as everyone somberly took that in. Olivia thought about the over-the-top gilded decorations in the room and the beautiful silks that upholstered and draped over every surface. The gardens out beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows were stunning. How could she be facing such danger in such a beautiful place? Millie caught Olivia's eye again. If we can't trust the law to deter Carolina, Chris and Sven also threatened her and Mason and told them to stay away from you. Mason's neck was bruised from Chris choking him. Olivia frowned. It's always kind of scary to think of Chris doing something like that. Lena nodded. Scary and kind of odd? Millie shot Lena a chastising look. What? It is. Millie took a breath and spoke carefully to Olivia. He's always been a guy who keeps his temper under control, right? Yes, always, Olivia answered quickly. I definitely trust him not to go too far. Millie sighed, relieved. It makes sense if a murderer can bring it out of him. In any case, that makes me worry about Chris knowing anything else bad that might happen. Steve nodded, agreeing. Yeah, so much bad stuff has been swirling around this competition so far. Royal Perry is definitely upset about that. I wonder if we should worry that Chris's actions could get Olivia or Wendy kicked out of the competition if he's found out before Carolina is. Lena's mind was blown away by all of this. This is not good. It definitely makes sense that that could happen. You can't lose your spot here, Olivia, especially after all you've been through. Millie crossed her arms, thoughtful. At least it seemed like Chris is done with Mason and Carolina for the time being. I don't think he'll be approaching them again unless Carolina does something else. Olivia knew this wasn't her fault, but still felt guilty that everyone was going through so much because this cutthroat sociopath Carolina had targeted her. Guys, we just need to hold on a little longer. We only have a few hours before the competition for the Knife God's last knife finally starts. When that's done, we can get out of here. Once we know who gets the last knife, all this desperate competition for it that's making things dangerous will be over. Olivia looked at each of her friends. They all seemed convinced except for Steve, who was staring off into space, puzzling over something. Olivia took a step toward him. Steve, if you were the attacker and you intended to strike again, when would you do it? If it were me, Steve frowned, I would attack during the competition itself. Things are the most heated. Everyone is distracted and worried about themselves or their own competitor. Olivia turned away from Steve. Millie, how about you? If I were the attacker, Millie paced a couple of steps. I would make my move after the competition. Lena piped up, confused. Why after? I don't get it. Millie explained. Everyone here still wants to be on Royal Perry's good side after this is all over. Royal will choose whoever gets his last knife. All the tension dies down, nobody is on guard anymore, and then you take out his choice when no one is looking. The Royal will choose again. The chances are higher he'll pick me, and I don't have to worry about having something stolen that I have to hide forever. Steve nodded, impressed. Smart. Lena was in awe. That's totally evil. Devious, Olivia agreed. Despicable, Dusty said. You guys asked, okay? Millie cried out sheepishly. Lena shook her head, still amazed at Millie's thoughtful plan. Nobody's afraid of nerds, but if we decide to get up to some trouble, we would really do it better than anybody else, huh? Carolina could really learn a thing or two from you if she stopped being such a jerk for 2 seconds. Everyone nodded in agreement with Lena. Millie turned red, embarrassed. Okay, that's enough. It was all hypothetical. I would never do anything like that. Lena was thoughtful. So if that's the smart way to do it, does that mean we're all basically safe until after the competition is over? Steve sighed. No, because we don't know if any of the people who would kill us to win are as smart as Millie. There will be a lot of stupid, greedy people willing to make trouble. Everyone should still be on high alert. Lena spun around and looked at Olivia, concerned. Oh no. Then is there any way to protect Olivia? Yes, Olivia and Millie said at the same time. They each looked at one another and smiled. Do we have the same plan? Olivia asked. Millie grinned. I think so. Olivia grinned. I love you so much, Millie. We're always on the same wavelength. What is it? Lena said, impatient and feeling left out. Millie patted Lena's shoulder. Well, we actually need your help for this. Olivia nodded. Yep, it definitely has to be you. Lena was worried. Why am I getting the feeling that I won't like this plan? You guys wouldn't mess with me, right? We're best friends. Olivia and Millie only chuckled, excited to share what they had up their sleeves. Wendy woke up in her bed feeling puffy, groggy, and dehydrated from being so upset earlier. Olivia and Millie sat in some chairs near her, chatting excitedly. But they were far enough away across the room that she couldn't make out what they were saying. Dusty sat dutifully in a chair next to the bed. Steve Shook and Lena were nowhere to be found. Wendy blinked her eyes open and stretched, sitting up. Millie noticed that Wendy was awake. "You're up." "Kind of. I feel so disoriented. What time even is it? What did I miss?" Wendy rubbed her eyes, which burned a little and felt sore. The memory of everything with Steve, and then finding Dusty all came flooding back to her, which was very unpleasant. What a mess, she thought internally. She covered her face with her hands. "What's wrong?" Olivia asked Wendy. Wendy glanced at Dusty. "Nothing," she mumbled. Dusty stood. "I'll get you some water." "Thanks, Dusty." Wendy felt grateful. Dusty was always calming. He really made her feel safe. But she did not want to talk about her issues with Steve in front of him. "Can you actually grab me some juice from downstairs? I feel like I need something sweet." "Of course," Dusty said kindly and left the room. As soon as he was gone, Millie sprang their question on Wendy again. "So please tell us what's wrong. Was it Steve's fault?" Millie and Olivia sat on Wendy's bed with her. Olivia shook her head severely. "If Steve did something—" Wendy raised her hands in protest. No, well, he kind of did something." Olivia gasped, standing. "Steve!" Wendy waved her hands. "Shush, he didn't do anything bad, this time. It was actually really nice, but then I just don't know if I can get over what he did to me back in school." Wendy sighed. I kissed him." Olivia and Millie covered their mouths with their hands in unison. Wendy leaned toward them urgently. "You guys, I said shush." "We didn't say anything," Olivia argued. I know. Wendy rubbed her forehead, her thoughts still a mess. "How did it happen?" Millie asked. "He was comforting me about a nightmare I had. After being around him this week for the first time in so long, I thought all the old feelings would be gone, but I just like him so much. We really fit together. He still makes my head swim. I feel so happy, but then—" Wendy trailed off. "He humiliated me. I wrote that love letter and he put it up for everybody to see, trying to hurt me. Once he realized I actually wrote it for him, it didn't matter. He had already totally ruined everything." Olivia and Millie exchanged a guilty look. They knew they should tell their friend the truth, but it had been so long. They had hoped that Wendy would be over everything that had happened, but they could see now that she hadn't. "Wendy, there's something you should know," Millie started, glancing at Olivia again. Olivia sighed, then continued from where Millie had started. "It wasn't Steve who posted the letter. It was Pamela." Wendy sat up straight, as if a bolt of electricity had shot through her. "What? Why didn't you tell me before?" "I didn't want you to dwell on things," Olivia explained. "You seemed to be doing so well after you left Marshall. All I wanted was for you to be happy." "But I think you shouldn't hold it against Steve now," Millie continued. Wendy sat in silence, taking it all in. Finally, she spoke up. "Thank you for telling me now, but it's too late. Too much time has passed, and besides, Steve could have reached out to me since I left, and he never did." Olivia put a hand on Wendy's arm. "We're here for you, Wendy, and he better be trying really hard to make it up to you." "Yeah," Wendy laughed bitterly. Wendy suddenly realized something. "Hey, where's Lena? It's weird that she's not with you guys. I would have told her all this, too." Millie smiled mysteriously and exchanged a look with Olivia. "Lena is busy." Olivia smiled back. "Yeah, she had some business to attend to." "Some light espionage," Millie said cryptically. Carlton pushed open the door to a huge, dark gallery, decorated with hundreds of swords and knives hanging up the high walls and on display racks arranged throughout the room. He opened the curtains on one of the tall windows and let in the sun. I know this is the fourth display gallery you've seen, but I believe it is my father's favorite. Are you sure you want to see this one too? Lena was bored out of her mind. Yeah, I love it. I can't get enough. You would think that after seeing so many knives forged by your dad and ancestors, I would not have an appetite for yet more seemingly identical knives forged by your dad and ancestors, but each one is a unique snowflake. Carlton sighed. If you say so. To be honest, I've always thought this stuff was boring. Olivia and Millie told Lena to get Carlton to give her a tour of the entire Perry estate. She was supposed to make sure as many people as possible saw the two of them walking around the building and its grounds together. As Millie had explained, everyone's got a target on Olivia because she seems to be the frontrunner for Royal's last knife. But there's also speculation that the knife could be given as an engagement gift to whoever Carlton and Royal find who would be right to marry Carlton. Lena was horrified. Ew, so you want me to make people think I want to marry Carlton? If you're seen as a competitor for the last knife, that could take some of the heat off Olivia, Millie pressed. Initially, Lena's knee-jerk reaction had been to outright refuse. Lena especially didn't want Frances to hear that she was strolling around canoodling with Carlton Perry. She also felt embarrassed at the idea of anybody thinking she would date Carlton, who was an aloof, arrogant weirdo. But after Olivia and Millie reminded her that this was about Olivia's safety, Lena begrudgingly agreed. Millie had also pointed out to Olivia in a sing-song voice that maybe it wasn't the worst thing if Frances felt a little jealous and got the impression that someone else was pursuing Lena. When Lena found Carlton and approached him, he was by himself in the banquet hall, taking a plate up to his room. Lena stumbled over her words a bit as she approached him at first. She was the most comfortable liar, but asked him for a tour of the estate. I just really love, knives and architecture and, really long curtains. All your curtains are so long. Carlton was confused. Well, there are a lot of staff here who can give you a tour of the estate. That's literally what we paid them for. I want the real insider knowledge, silly. Lena touched his arm playfully and immediately regretted it. I know you must know more than anybody else around here. Carlton's huge, fragile ego was pleased to hear her say this. He smiled. Well, that is true. But I've got some stuff to do. I was just going to head upstairs and play. A shadow came over his expression as he remembered the way Lena had embarrassed him the last time they went up against each other online. Carlton got an idea. What if you play PvP with me one-on-one? No audience this time and no teammate, just us. And if you beat me, you don't have to give me the tour? Carlton weighed this. If I can make it 5 minutes with you without dying, I don't have to give you the tour. Lena smiled. She liked that he wasn't willing to bet he could beat her outright. He just wanted to last 5 minutes. What a humble aspiration. Carlton huffed, annoyed. Do you agree to the terms or not? I agree, she smiled, genuinely enjoying his discomfort. I just think it's so honorable of you to set realistic goals for yourself. Follow me. Carlton stomped out of the banquet hall and Lena followed. They headed upstairs to play, and before his character died, Carlton lasted 15 seconds. Lena had actually been trying to go easy on him, but a lucky damage roll and a thoughtless mistake on Carlton's part made the whole thing end almost as soon as it began. Lena knew she was trying to butter Carlton up, but couldn't resist a jab. Greatest knife master lasted 15 seconds. I wish I could call you a Minuteman, but that would be unfair to Minutemen. We'll start in the gardens, Carlton snapped, angry. As Carlton led her around the many sights of the vast estate, Lena saw that they were attracting stares and whispers. Carlton hadn't been hanging out with anybody for the duration of Royal's event, so this definitely caught people's attention. The plan was proceeding as it was supposed to, but by the time they got to this fourth display gallery for the knives and swords, that Lena truly could not have told apart if her life depended on it, Lena was tired, bored, and having a really hard time trying to hide her yawns by straining to keep her mouth closed and her eyes open. She checked the time on her phone. thinking she must be almost done. But she had not even used up half the time Olivia and Millie asked her to keep Carlton busy. Lena wanted to scream. She turned to Carlton. "Hey, could we sit down for a minute? I just really want to take our time. This is such a beautiful room. Let's totally, savor it. Drink it in." Carlton looked around the room confused. "I guess." He was about to sit on one of the antique benches in this display gallery, but Lena pulled him outside. "No, let's sit out here." She dragged him to the decorative sofas in the corridor, where there were plenty of guests passing by to see them. They sat. Carlton looked around and pointed upward. "Well, I guess I can tell you about this. There's actually a funny story about the plaster that they made this ceiling out of." A yawn escaped Lena's mouth. She clapped a hand over it, but Carlton definitely noticed. "Are you tired or something? We can be done if you have somewhere else to be." No. I just yawn when I'm super excited." Lena got an idea. "Hey, can I show you something I think you'll really like? I don't show it to a lot of people." She cocked her head mischievously. Carlton was startled to hear this. "Out here? In front of everybody?" "Yeah." Lena pulled out her phone. Carlton leaned forward. "These are those bunnies you were dying to ask everyone about." Carlton was confused. Lena pulled up a video of Nuggets and cheese in a pen and the son at the place taking care of them while Lena was away. "The white one is Nuggets, see?" Carlton watched a few seconds of the video, expressionless. What weird names. That's all you have to say in the face of their cuteness? And they're not weird names. I love them, and I named them after two things I love. "What do you name your pets?" Carlton hesitated. I've never had a pet." "You've never had a pet? Do you want one?" "Yeah," Carlton admitted. "But I don't know if I'd ever get a rabbit. Do they even do anything?" "Are you kidding me?" Lena was shocked. "Look at this. Video evidence that you are wrong. Nuggets is doing something. He's cleaning his little face." "Sure," Carlton smirked. "They have huge personalities. Nuggets is more active than Cheese and way cleaner. They're both really snuggly. Cheese is way smarter, and once, Millie didn't close their cage after feeding them and they escaped. They do a lot of stuff. What do you have to say to that?" From afar, someone was watching Lena speak animatedly to Carlton. Lena and Carlton both laughed and looked like they were having a good time together. The person watching them was Francis. He couldn't believe his eyes. He shook his head, hurrying off in the other direction.